This week on Q&A, our guest is the president of Southern Methodist University, R. Gerald Turner. The university will be the site of the George W. Bush Presidential Library, scheduled to open in 2013.
Dr. Gerald Turner, president of Southern Methodist University. Is it true you have a slogan, "The truth shall set you free"?
Well, that's the motto that was identified to accompany the opening of the school when it was founded in 1911 and opened in 1915. So that is the motto.
What's it mean today to you?
Well, I think it means to all of us, if the truth will set you free, that means that the basic goal of the institution is to try to find truth, whether that's in our research efforts and teaching or in the human experiences or whatever. But of course, ultimately, the goal is to find what's really there, what sustains.
What's the toughest part of being a president today, and what's the best part of being a president?
The toughest part of being a president, I tell people when they say, "What is your job description?" And I say it's the coordination of incompatible forces. And truthfully, that's pretty much the case. If you're in business, you've got one basic goal, and that is to increase shareholder value and make it quarter to quarter and so on. And you can be pretty focused about it. Whereas here we have so many goals. The truth shall set you free. You've got to sponsor research. You've got to sponsor recruitment of the best students you can get who can come in and learn what we do know, past and present, and hopefully pointing toward the future. And so the constituencies you have sometimes have truly incompatible goals for the institution, and you have to kind of plow through trying to get as much support as possible from those constituencies toward a vision and toward an image that their different ways of approaching things can align behind and energize. And so the complexity of a university president's job, I think, is something that wears a lot of people out. Either wears you out or you're energized by it. And to me, that's what makes the job exciting, is because no 2 days are the same, and you've got to keep ahead of the pack to some extent. And so the variety of it, the complexity of it, I think is what makes it difficult. All of those things make it difficult, but they also make it enjoyable in some way.
How many students?
We have about 11,000 students total. We keep the undergraduate enrollment at 6,200, very stable. The 4,800 are professional and graduate, and they can vary somewhat. But we admit 1,400 first-year students a year and 300 transfers, so that's really stable. The undergraduates, our goal is for half of them to be from Texas and half from out of state. And so that half that come from out of state, California is always first, Florida second, Illinois is usually third. And then Georgia, Tennessee, Missouri is always in there, Connecticut is in there. And so the top 10 states don't vary a whole lot, but it's kind of a zero-sum game. So if California goes up, somebody else goes down.
The Southern Methodist University, how important today is the Methodist part?
Well, the Methodist heritage we put up front in our statement. The only person on campus that has to be Methodist is the dean of the Perkins School of Theology. My predecessor was Catholic, and so there's a lot of variation here, and there are a lot of people that are not Christian that are on the faculty or and in the student body and with the staff too. But I think it gives us a set of values, a set of direction, and a direction. And one of the things I like the most about it is that it's still a place where all variations and approaches toward truth are viable. And so the spiritual dimension of life still has its place in conversation. It's just that it's not mandatory or it's not foisted on anyone, but it's just a part of the dialogue here. And so in a very real way, I think a school like SMU that has a tradition of open inquiry, academic freedom, and so on, that the spiritual dimension of our existence is still something that can be discussed, really gives it a much broader perspective than maybe if it's purely secular or if it's very strongly religious and not tolerant throughout the continuum.
If I read it right, you started in a community college or a small, where you got an associate degree?
Mm-hmm.
Explain that, because today with the expense of college, so many people are starting with the community colleges. Yeah. And where did you start?
Well, I actually got farmed out. I was from a small town, New Boston, and where, you know, you played every sport. And
Texas?
In Texas, northeast Texas, up by Texarkana. And if you were very good at all, there were opportunities for you. And I actually grew up reading the Dallas Morning News and hoping I could play it. I loved basketball more than the others. I played football and everything else, but wanted to play here, but wasn't that good. And so Abilene Christian was recruiting me and talking with me, and they had a very good point guard in a little town. I'd been a forward, and so they decided I need to become a guard. And so they literally said, why don't you go to, then it was a 2-year school, Lubbock Christian College, which frankly I didn't know existed at the time, but go up there and then we'll bring you back here after this other guy graduates. So I literally went up there to play basketball and tore up my knee my sophomore year to where I couldn't continue on it, but I went back to Abilene on an academic scholarship because I'd maintained, you know, that focus throughout it all.
Where did you go next?
After Abilene, I went to UT Austin and got my master's and PhD. But the fact that I have an AA degree, I like to note, and whenever we're recruiting community college, because of that 300 transfer students I mentioned, each year 160 to 170 of them are local. They're place-bound. They're older than our traditional students. I think they just add a lot to our upper division classes. And so when I got here, we set up a number of articulation agreements with the local community colleges. We created a scholarship program to where we give 10 full tuition scholarships to the local Dallas County and Collin County community colleges. And so there's a lot of competition for those. And it's helped solidify the opportunity that's here, because people in this part of the world know the value of an SMU education, and they're learning it all over the country. And so those 10 spots are important, and they're important to me because I know I can communicate to these students that they are welcomed here, and that I do know some of the transfer issues they might have, and that they will be welcomed.
Now, you got a PhD from UT also, University of Texas, in psychology.
That's
Where
right.
did you get your interest in psychology, and how have you used it during your academic career?
Well, I was majoring in math and looking for something to put it with, because I knew I wanted to teach in a college or university. My parents were teachers in public schools, and so in a real way I'm in the family business. And I just started taking some psychology courses, and it made a lot of sense to me, particularly when you saw how statistically based most of the conclusions were. And so I ended up undergraduate having 30 hours of psychology and 30 hours of math, and even on my graduate degree I took 18 hours of graduate statistics and ended up teaching that more than psychology. But it was just an interest, and it was a way I could utilize another ability I knew I had, and that was in mathematics.
So what's the difference? What year did you get out of your undergrad degree?
Undergrad in 68.
What's the difference for a person going to college in 68 or graduating and today?
Well, the competition is a lot stiffer in terms of admissions and getting in graduate programs and various things like that. The costs obviously are greater than they were, because for state schools were really supplying the predominance of the operational funds for state colleges and universities. And I think there was a greater hunger for the college graduate. There wasn't as many of them out there as there are now on a proportional basis. And so I think it's like everything else. It's harder to be a young person today than it was then. I mean, you've got more things diverting you. You've got more drug and alcohol pressures on you than we had growing up. You know, to have a few beers when we were growing up was the main thing, whereas now the plethora of options that are pushed on these kids is just enormous. And so I think it was easier growing up when I was growing up than it is now.
If we saw you in a meeting with your staff talking about the drug and alcohol problems of students, what kind of things would you be talking about?
Well, we talk about them all the time, and we had a task force on drug and alcohol abuse prevention that spent a year and came out with a report in 2008 that we've been trying to implement a number of things, and that would be working with local bars on trying to make them utilize our ID set so they know who's of underage, because every kid in America that's 18 can prove he's 21 with these fake IDs that are a huge industry in our country. And working with the students to try to help identify how is it that we can encourage activities that are alcohol-free, and how do you teach for 21-year-olds and above responsible drinking and various things like that, and what is our disciplinary program regarding drugs. We have a big counseling center here to try to help students, but yet you've got to be pretty intolerant of those, because it can catch on and one thing lead to another and so on. So every campus in this country is deeply concerned about alcohol and drug abuse, and not so much, I mean, some of it's created on our campuses, but it is amazing how many kids bring problems to you. And you see all the surveys about much abuse starting in junior high and those kinds of things. So the challenges to us are enormous, and I think that's not only one of the major challenges facing higher ed in this country, but also facing our country, and that is how we maintain a healthy lifestyle and get kids to have the strength and the judgment to say no, and to use those things that are illegal with moderation.
What's worse for you, the drugs or the alcohol?
Well, the drugs are worse in terms of just how damaging their effects would be. Alcohol is more pervasive, obviously, but kids, once they get hooked on cocaine or any of the other kinds of really addictive drugs, really have a hard time. Fortunately, we don't have as much of that as a lot of places do, but we have a lot more than we want to experience, that's for sure.
You started out where after you got your PhD?
I started out at Pepperdine in Malibu. And
that's a religious connection school.
Yeah, it is. It has a historical basis in the Churches of Christ, but it's been, like SMU, it's been pretty open, SMU more so historically as well as now, but still it has that religious tradition that is similar. It's in the family of schools like SMU.
Then where?
Then to Oklahoma. I was at Pepperdine for 4 years, then I went to Oklahoma. The president at Pepperdine went to Oklahoma and then eventually hired me to be his chief of staff. First title was executive assistant, then was vice president for executive affairs, and I served a little term as interim provost, and then served there for 5 years, and then went to Ole Miss as chancellor.
How long were you at Ole Miss?
11 years.
Now that's a state school.
That's a state school.
Okay.
Oklahoma State
What's
School.
the big difference? This is private, that's state. What are the two institutions? How do they differ?
When I moved back here, meaning back to private higher ed, I had a lot of people ask me, what's the difference? And I told them, 2/3 to 3/4 is the same. You're still hiring the best faculty you can. You're still trying to recruit the best students you can. But the 25%, 1/3 that's different is really refreshing. I felt like I'd been repotted, so to say. And, there's the pressure of raising the money, but you do get to eat what you kill. And in the state system, there was always this fighting back and forth and competition with other institutions in ways that made it difficult. And I just very much like having the ability to say, well, we're private institutions and we don't do that, or that we basically want to go in this direction, and if we can get the board approval and someone to fund it, you can bring it about. When we want to add a program, let's say a company, and this has happened over and over and over, a company will say, we need to have our employees have access to a program in X that does Y and Z. We can basically go to, let's say, our engineering program, and they can develop a program like that and get it off the blocks within 6 to 8 months. And whereas a state school will require about 2 years. And oftentimes the local state schools will add that on, but we will have already gone through a cohort before they get theirs started. And businesses find that's very helpful. And I just like that responsivity very much that you can have in private higher education.
When you walk around this campus, you see a brand new football stadium, a brand new art center. You see the names of a lot of different people on schools.
Yeah.
And I gather that's money.
Mm-hmm.
Why do people give lots of money? And if you can say, what's the biggest contributor you've ever had to SMU?
Well, I think people give to higher education because they want to be proactive, and they want to do something that lasts. If you really look at it, in our society, in human society, the two things that have endured are universities and churches. I mean, and you look at governments that turn over and so on. There's a life cycle for many, but the universities are 1,000 years old, and the church is older than that, and not only churches but religious institutions. And so those are at the core of I think, human expression. And you feel that if you're giving to a university, that you're helping younger people and you're ensuring the best of civilization gets to go forward. And people often have very strong ties to the piece of ground that they went to school on, you know, that their buildings were on and so on. And so we have a tremendous dedication, as you can imagine, to a campus as beautiful as this one is. People really get tied to it and want to be a part of it. But in our last campaign, 40% of the donors weren't alums. They were people who believe in the university, who believe in what its role is in this part of the world and so on, and wanted to be a part of it. And so as a result, they have helped. And frankly, I push very much people putting their names on things, because if the leaders in an area and your alumni are not willing to put their name out on the institution with you, then, you know, what do you say about that? A lot of people want to be anonymous, and I can understand that, but it's affirming to a university when one of its stellar alums will put their name forward and endow a scholarship or endow a school or department or build a building or help to build a building. So all of that kind of works together because a private school really is the sum of its alumni and supporters. I mean, if it ever loses credibility with those groups of people, then there's no reason for it to exist.
What's your biggest contributor? Who is?
Well, I wouldn't say who, but the biggest numbers are in the 50 million range and so on. Some go up toward 70 in total over time. We have not had yet $100 million donors, but I'm certainly looking for that. And anybody listening, well, I'd love them to be the first one.
Can people give to this university anonymously?
Yes, sure.
So you don't have to divulge where the money comes from?
No, and we have a number of chairs that are anonymous, and sometimes the person will designate someone that will, whose name might be on that. We had a donor designate a faculty member that was retiring. He honored that faculty member with the chair because that faculty member had meant so much to him in his education and in a particular aspect of history. And so there are all kinds of ways to do it, but it's always nice that someone will sign on with you and say, we're in this together.
Over what, $1.3 billion in your endowment?
Well, it's about $1.1 billion now. It was $1.4 billion before the recession hit, and then like most, we lost about a quarter, and now it's coming back. But we're in the 53, well, really in the 50s in terms of size of endowment. Our endowment's new. SMU really didn't get into raising money until after the 70s. It was just a matter of building the campus and various things like that. And so our endowment in 1971 was $70 million. So it's new, which means that it's restricted. People in about the late 60s started restricting their gifts, that it's going to go to business or it's going to go to scholarships or whatever. Before that time, the older endowments like Harvard's and most of the Ivies, they have huge parts of it that are unrestricted. And so they can decide to put it in scholarships or build buildings or renovate buildings or whatever else. Whereas for a school like us, that the endowment's basically new, very little of it's unrestricted.
As you know, a couple weeks ago, we did a program with George W. Bush sitting right in that chair. The reason I bring that up is that Laura Bush is on your board.
She is.
His minister for years, Kirby John Caldwell, is on your board.
He is.
Ray Hunt, the famous, I don't know Ray Hunt, but it's a famous Texas name.
Right.
And Sarah Perot.
Mm-hmm.
Who does she relate to in this?
Sarah Perot is an alumna.
But who's she married to?
She's married to Ross Jr., Ross Perot Jr. And so he went to Vanderbilt, but he had been on our board too. But Sarah's an SMU alumna, and so we're very pleased to have them a part of the university family.
How big is your board?
My board is 42. It has a number of ex officio members. We have the president of the faculty senate's a member. We have a voting student that has the same votes as everyone else. An alumnus, and we have three bishops. 3 bishops of the United Methodist Church are on the board. And so it turns over more or less every 4 years. People have to be reaffirmed, and there's a term limit of 3 4-year terms. There can be exceptions, but by and large that's stayed with. And the 42 is a good size. It obviously has to not only govern the university but encourage others to be a part of the university.
Go back to the first moment that you thought about trying to get George W. Bush to bring his library and his institute and his museum here on this campus.
Well, the first time we really set it in action, I mean, when he started running, you'd say, wouldn't it be nice? But we didn't do anything at all until after the Florida vote. And after that vote, that next morning, I walked into my Vice President for Executive Affairs, the position I had at Oklahoma, and his name's Tom Berry, and said, Dr. Berry, what do you know about presidential libraries? And he said, I don't know anything about presidential libraries. And I said, wrong answer, Dr. Berry. You're going to become an expert. And so he has been to most of them, and we put together a committee and started working toward it. And it was a very tense, competitive situation, because there were a lot of institutions and cities around here that had claims that they could make also for why it should be there.
From outside of the Dallas area, I noticed just reading about the Bush Library on this campus, it appeared to have a lot of academic reaction, negative reaction to it.
Well, there was a group of faculty that did have concerns about it, and as I told people who were very supportive of it, this is a university after all, and anything important is going to have a lot of dialogue and debate. So we did, but the faculty as a whole were always behind it. But nevertheless, there were some legitimate questions that faculty members asked, and over that period of time we addressed them. We started our effort in 2001, as we mentioned, our planning part of it, and then in 2008, when we were basically identified as the recipient, that had left a good bit of time there for different things to be brought up and debated and so on. And so as a result, as you would expect on a university, you had differences of opinion. But I think most of them were resolved, and I think the campus as a whole is delighted to have the Bush Library Center over there.
My memory serves me, Ronald Reagan, they toyed with the idea of going to Stanford, and that they ran into the same problem there, and there are other instances like that. I've heard conservatives say this is nothing more than a bunch of left-wing academics who don't want anything from the right or George Bush on any campus. What would you say to that?
Well, I think on university campuses, the data pretty much shows that particularly in the humanities and social sciences, you probably have more leaning to the left than to the right. But issues that have to do with the direction of the university are the appropriate purview of the faculty, and they need to debate them, and they need to talk about them. And having different points of view on the campus, ultimately, you shall know the truth. The idea is that there's different directions toward trying to understand what is ultimately the truth, and so you need different points of view. People would ask, why was I so convinced this was the right thing for the university? And a large part of that conviction not only came from conversations with the president and people around him about what they wanted, but when I was in graduate school in Austin, they announced that the LBJ library would be there. And that was enormously controversial. There were demonstrations against that because this was the late 60s, early 70s. And now, if you tried to remove the LBJ library from Austin, you'd have demonstrations and so on. And so that experience really taught me that that the value of a presidential library, if it has something that goes forward, and it's not just a mausoleum, more or less, you know, of things that occurred in a period of time, but has something that moves it forward, like the LBJ School will and like the Institute here will, then they are worth working toward because it was really a tough time in Austin when that was announced. And so there were also a number of faculty here who were in graduate school at that time down there at the same time I was, and they could verify that was the case. And so that made me feel like that if it were set up appropriately, it would have immense and continuing value to the university and to the greater Dallas area, North Texas area over time, because now there is kind of a constellation of presidential libraries here with Clinton, this one, Bush 41, and LBJ, all within kind of driving distance of each other.
And this will be the 13th presidential library.
Would be.
How much money did you have to raise for this project?
There wasn't any set amount, but I felt like as a part of our proposal that it would be important for those that were advising the president to know there was a lot of support. And so we had 20 individuals who said they would do at least $1 million if it came here. I have been a part of the fundraising effort, and so I can assure you that those associated with SMU have given a lot more than $20 million, but we haven't divided it up that way. I can just tell you that it's a very significant part of the contributions, but also the contributions come from all over the country. I mean, literally coast to coast. So not only did SMU people contribute to it, but a lot of people who have never given anything to SMU are helping to build something here on the SMU campus.
So once that opens in 2013, how much of it do you own and how much of it does the Bush Library, or how does the foundation own?
Well, the foundation owns the facility, and so it's really a working arrangement between the university, the Bush Foundation, and NARA. And NARA will, of course, run the library and museum, and the Bush Foundation will run the institute and the general operation of the facility. We have leased them the land, and so we are going to have a lot of joint programs with the institute and with the library. We'll have a lot of student interns, students working there, but we also want to have some what we call concurrent fellow appointments, people who have appointments in the Bush Institute, but that the faculty of a particular department or school has voted them to have an appointment in the university also. And so I think those things going back and forth, joint programming, concurrent appointments, all can help invigorate a number of areas of the university and certainly add to the dynamism of the library center.
Go back, I believe it was about 1995 when you came here. Why'd you leave Ole Miss to come to SMU?
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, I had always had a sense I'd like to be at SMU, and I had 4 sets of aunts and uncles in Dallas, so Dallas always meant an awful lot to me. I came here quite a bit growing up. And so when the opportunity presented itself, well, then it was very much of interest to me. And SMU was at a point in time that I felt like what I could do fit with what they needed. And Ken Pye was a friend of mine, my predecessor, and I knew what he had done to stabilize the institution and basically create a great foundation, but he didn't enjoy the external aspects of a presidency, and that's the part I really do enjoy, although, you know, the daily work of running an institution's always there, but still, I enjoy getting out and trying to make people believe in the vision and want to be a part of it.
But you serve on a number of corporate boards.
3,
You also are co-chairman of the Knight Commission.
Correct.
And are you still involved with the NCAA?
Not directly with them. I'm on the board of the ACE and NAICU, which are higher education groups that meet quarterly.
Go back to the Knight Commission. What is it?
Well, the Knight Commission was set up to try to address some of the major problems facing intercollegiate athletics in 1989, had a first report in 91. I went on in 90 and have been with it ever since. But it basically surrounds the idea that as a part of the part of the campus community, intercollegiate athletics should play its proper role. And even then, there was the concern that academics weren't being emphasized enough, issues of student welfare, the financing of it, and so on, that there were the beginnings of the commercialism that now is just rampant throughout it, and that there needed to be some voice outside the NCAA basically trying to address these things with no authority, only the bully pulpit if we ever had it. But every time that we've gone dormant for a while, issues and the demand of our colleagues kind of bring us back into operation. And so it is, it's just one of those things you do because we have the unusual circumstance of having athletic programs associated with our universities. I mean, here we are built on the German model and so on, and that didn't occur. But when the first yacht races started, well, then that got everything underway.
So what did you take to the Knight Commission, and what are the kind of things you might have had something to say about that the different documents that they've released?
Well, the first one has really been the foundation of it, and that's called the 3+1 model, that presidential control in service to academic fidelity, certification, and financial fidelity. And so the whole issue back at that time was, do presidents have the authority to run their programs? Because trustees often, particularly in state universities, would simply take over the athletic program. And there were a lot of private foundations or associations that raised all the money and were not a part of the university. And so athletics was really operating on a parallel track in some places. And so the effort was, if they're going to represent the university, they ought to be a part of the university. And so that's been the effort. And I chaired when the certification was passed, and that is an effort to try to have peers come in and review the operation of your athletic program, just like they do your academic, student affairs, financial, Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, for example, in this area of the country, that there would be a certification every so often of athletic programs to try to bring more light into how things were operating and try to build some trust across institutions and conferences. And so we passed that on the Knight Commission. The NCAA asked me if I would chair the creation of it. So it was, one of those things of be careful what you ask for, you may get it. So for 5 years, we worked for a year, really 2 years, creating certification from a blank sheet of paper. And then I chaired the first iteration of all 306 schools, I believe it was in Division I at that time. And in between that time and now, it's just been efforts toward academic reform. I feel very good about the fact that now student athletes are required in high school to take a set of courses that gives them a realistic chance to get a college degree. Now, the high schools, certainly have to furnish real courses for that, but before there really weren't any standards, and kids were arriving on colleges without a chance of really getting a college degree at a real university. And so I think there have been a lot of things that really have been for the benefit of the student athlete, but I think that the rampant commercialism that is the infatuation of Americans with sport, and the fact that basically television network, cable, and so on view us just as product, has increased the demand, and to where that's one of the great challenges facing higher education right now.
But as you know, you've been criticized for the kind of money you spend on a football coach.
Right.
And you tell me, but I don't know what you acknowledge, but it's been published that you pay him as much as $2 million a year.
If you take everything together, that's been published, and that would be about accurate. They're running up now to 4 to 5. We basically did an analysis with a group of individuals on the board of trustees, and the amount of money we were losing per year having programs that weren't competitive, 1 and 11, 2 and 10, whatever. Why didn't we try to get someone, because each year each time we made a change, we would hire an assistant and hope that assistant could move up to the next level and be a head coach. And basically you find that you can be right some and wrong a lot. And so we decided to hire one that had some experience under his belt and some success. And the board, that group of individuals of the board agreed to furnish that outside of what they normally do to give it the try, to see if then over time ticket sales and other kinds of things wouldn't make up the difference. And during this last 3 years where this, quote, experiment's been going on, the operational deficit of the athletic program has gone down over $3 million during that period of time, and hopefully will continue to trend down. That's where we've expected. So far it's worked about like we expected.
As you know, at many colleges and universities, the coach of the football team makes significantly more money than the president of the school. Is that a good trend?
Well, I think it reflects the market. And I think you can find in medical schools, you'll find that there are some faculty members there in their professional practice plans and so on that make multiples of what the president of that institution makes also. So as athletics gets more commercialized and it reflects more of the market, I think that continues in basketball and football. So far, the other sports haven't really come up to that level, but you see signs of it in baseball now. and you wonder how long it will be before you start seeing huge salaries in baseball, because more and more TV contracts for college baseball games are being signed. I don't have a baseball team, but nevertheless, that's something that presidents are beginning to discuss a lot.
What was your experience on the Knight Commission as to how many colleges or universities around the country make money off of the athletics and how many lose money?
Well, in the last 5 years, there are 120 football bowl subdivisions, formerly Division 1A. There are 120 of those. 7 have broken even or made money each of the last 5 years. Last year, 2009, 14 broke even or made money. And what you see is a very small number of schools really driving everyone. And in their conferences, even in what we call the AQ conferences, automatic qualifying conferences, you see a very few schools are driving the rest, and that many in those same conferences are having a hard time keeping up. And so I don't know where all of it's headed, but I do know that it's taking more time than college presidents want to spend on it. And the emphasis within academic communities, particularly within alumni and friends of the school, interest in athletics doesn't seem to be waning.
When you sit in your office or you do your job, how often do you just go, I can't believe I'm squeezed here between the alums that want the good football teams and the academics who could care less of it and all that? I mean, what's the worst part of that situation?
Well, I think every president knows that there is a vice that's more than two-sided there. I mean, it comes from a lot of different directions. And it is an important aspect of the job in terms of being able to, again, moderate those incompatible forces and to coordinate them in ways that are constructive. And I'm fortunate here at SMU that there are many, many people that are supportive of the institution and are building the academic programs and giving the scholarships and so on, that don't care that much about the athletic program, and that there are people who do care about it singly, and there's some that care about both. And so the idea is to keep all three groups supportive to where the total institution goes forward. And I think if you look at the buildings and the increase in average SATs and research and all that, we've been able to do that.
Now, on a personal side, you have a daughter that's a soprano?
I do. I have a daughter that's a soprano and a daughter that's an actor.
How did that happen out of the Turner family?
That's a debate that Gail and I constantly have. You know, where did those genes line up from? But no, our daughter Angela is an opera singer, soprano, and is a very good one. And she, you know, I have in my family some musical talent. I have a cousin that was opera singer, and others that could play various things. Gail's mother has some musical talent and so on, and what we think is it just all aligned vocally behind her. Our daughter that's really does a lot of stage acting, some movies, but mainly she likes to be on stage. She has been on stage most of her life because she was the younger daughter. And I became chancellor at Ole Miss when she was 7, so she's been in a glass bowl and a fish bowl, excuse me, and various things like that. But both of them are very talented, and we're very proud of them, and some of our great joys are watching them perform.
Is there any part of this job you don't like?
There are parts of it that I would rather do than others, but as a whole, every day I'm ready to get to work, and every day I enjoy being a part of it. And it's not like a job, really. I mean, it's a way of life, because it's 7 days a week. I'm always the president. And if I go out, you know, you see people and various things like that. One time, my younger daughter, when she was about 8 or 9, Gail said, well, where are we going on vacation this year? And her first statement was, let's go someplace where no one knows Daddy. And so, you know, it's always there. You do need a break from it, but again, if you're not energized by it, well, then you're in the wrong business. But there's no one particular thing I dislike that colors the whole job in a way that I don't get up every morning ready to go do it.
How should one determine whether they should have a college degree?
If a person has a skill that is at a high level, or they believe it can be at a high level, and that can be both in electronics, or it can be in carpentry, or it can be in painting, or various other kinds of things. I think education is always there to augment whatever skills one has. But I do think that there are trades and other kinds of things in which a person could make a very good living and not go to a college or a university. But if they will have, unless they read a lot, they will miss really the richness of the human experience, both present and in the past. And I think the ability to deal with the vicissitudes of life are increased by one's going to college, because you get different perspectives. And as Harry Truman says, there's nothing new under the sun, only history you don't know. That's an exaggeration, but it's still some truth to that. And so I don't think college is necessary for everyone by any means, but I do think that for most people that want a greater sense of the world around them and the ability to deal with business, engineering, those kinds of things, that you really have to come to college. For others, we need to find ways that they can make a good living that doesn't put them in a college system where probably their lack of interest or preparation will lead them to fail.
Name something that SMU does with students that as you look around the rest of academia, they don't do it anyplace else.
They don't do it anyplace else.
In other words, some special, the college that I went to, Purdue, everybody that goes there, whether you're an engineer or not, has to take a speech course. Mm-hmm. $7,000 a year takes the speech 104. Is there something, 114, is there something that kids who come here have to do, or that you do, it's unique to SMU?
I don't know of any course requirement. Our curricular setup is, in combination, I think, is very similar to other places, but it has some differences and provides opportunities for students to get some unique experiences. We have some fairly unique programs. We have one of the only master's program in digital game development that there is in the country. It was, I think, the first one, which in that community means a lot. But within our undergraduate programs, we have, I think, research opportunities that kids don't have as undergraduates most places, and because of their size or whatever else. And I think the leadership opportunities we have are just enormous, from being on our board to being on board committees and various things like that. I know more schools have added that on, but when SMU started in '88, there weren't many schools that had a voting student on every board committee and as the board itself. And so I think those kinds of opportunities, in sum, are fairly unique for SMU.
If I use the two words, death penalty, what does that mean to you?
Well, obviously that occurred with our football program in the mid to late '80s, in which the violations occurred in sequence and within a period of time that the membership felt like that was deserving of it.
What does that mean?
It simply means that we couldn't compete in intercollegiate football in that sport for that year. The institution decided to add another year to it to kind of get everything organized and in order. And so that really has had a very detrimental effect on particularly on the intercollegiate athletic program, but particularly football here. And we're just now kind of coming out of it. Some positive things that did come out of it were the fact that the board was restructured and to where it's now kind of a model structure, and a lot of schools have copied different components of it. Also, it allowed the institution, I think, to really review itself and kind of hit the start button all over again, which structurally you usually don't get a chance to do. But as I've always said, there got to be easier ways to do that than what we had to go through.
But that didn't happen while you were here.
No, that happened in '86 to '88 was when that process occurred. I got here in '95.
Has that happened to any other school in the country?
It has not. There have been other schools that have been fairly close to getting it, but I think just seeing the effect on SMU has made the membership of the NCAA a little more reluctant to do that to other institutions. And ours was compounded. The effect of it was compounded by the fact that the Southwest Conference dissolved in that period of time. And so all these schools in Texas plus Arkansas had been together forever. And when that fell apart, and a number of us then were not moved into the Big 12, but became part of the WAC. That created a series of games and conference memberships that our alumni didn't know. And so on a regular basis, we weren't playing Texas and Texas A&M and so on. And so I think the effect of the death penalty was accentuated by the fact that the Southwest Conference dissolved at the same time. People attribute all the effect to the death penalty, but that's really not true. It was a double whammy.
But as you look at, either as president of this school or as co-chairman of the Knight Commission, you look around this country, are most schools honest?
Well, I think schools are a lot more honest than they used to be. I think presidents are really trying to be. I think most coaches and most athletic directors don't want that. I think there are probably exceptions that occur, and there are inadvertent things that occur. That sometimes you break rules when you're not aware that you have, and so you have to report those in and so on. But I think usually where there are blatant violations, there are external forces that are doing things that shouldn't be, and there's usually somebody inside, one or more, and so the extent to which the institution knows it is what basically I think is what's pertinent in there. But for SMU, when I got here, because Dr. Pye had led sort of a reassessment of things, there was such a readiness to move out and to be back assertive. And so all these new facilities that you see, the fact that we've added 50 acres of land and buildings, and the fact that our scholarship profile's going up and the faculty profile's going up and so on, all are a result of people really saying it's time to get going again. It's time for this school to emerge nationally. And so the great things that we've had here in the last 15 years in many ways have their foundation in that negative aspect of it, to try to overcome it in a very real way. And so I've been the beneficiary of all that work, and I've said many instances I know that I stand on Ken Pye's broad shoulders and many others that were part of that all of this positive era that we're in really came out of some just terribly difficult years.
So I want to come to SMU.
All right.
What does my SAT have to be?
Well, the average for this next year will be somewhere between 1250 and 1260. It was 1140 10 years ago. So we've come up over 100 points. The number of students that will apply this year will be about 3 times. It'll be 12 to 13,000. We'll have a first year class of 1,400. And so each year the average is going up somewhere between 6 to 10 points. And so our goal is to be at 1,300 by 2015, and not to lose the leadership character, the involvement character, the very entrepreneurial kind of character that our students have. And that's a challenge, because we don't want just people who want to be in labs and stay there. We want them that want to be leaders in their areas and that have interpersonal skills and so on. And so you would need basically 3.6 to 3.7 in our core. We have a core of 18 courses, and over a 1,200 if you wanted in, or 1,250 if you wanted in early admission.
What happened? I mean, I'm not that aware of what happened, but I know they added 800 points at some point with the writing. Do you all use that on the SAT?
No, when I mention that score, I'm basically talking about the two subparts, the verbal and the quantitative. If you put the other part on it, you would need about a 1,900.
So you're talking about a 1,600 point score.
Yeah, that's when I say 1,250.
All right, then I don't qualify for any aid. How much do I pay?
The tuition this year, the tuition fees was about $37,000. Room and board, if you were living on campus and having the average meal plan, would have been about $49. Next year we'll be at about $52. About 70% of our kids get some kind of financial aid, be it need-based or merit-based or whatever else. And so for students that have a lot of ability, there's a way to come.
And that's going to cost me a total of $45,000?
For this next year, it'll be about 42.5, 43, something like that.
Is there books and all that thrown in there? Is going to be even more?
No, that includes
everything.
Mm-hmm.
How fast?
Excuse me. If you add all of those up, you'll be over 50,000. I'm sorry. The tuition will be close to 40, and then room and board and everything will be right over 50.
And you still have 3 times the number of people that you can bring into a school that are willing to pay that.
Yeah, for the 1,400, we'll have about, like I said, 13,000 applications for 1,400 spots.
So if you were in charge of a leadership school for future presidents of universities, and you had to give them some tips, talking about the way you carry yourself around the school, the hours you keep, your whole philosophy, what are some of the things you'd tell a leadership school on being a president of a school?
Well, one, that very few that are presidents intended to be. And you came into it because you had some ideas that you wanted to implement, and you saw that you could have a greater impact doing that. But you have to be able to work with individuals. You've got to be able to, you can't have a very high threat ratio. You can't have a hot temper. You've got to be able to moderate yourself as you try to moderate all the forces that are coming in. And you've got to be able to see down the road. You've got to know that if I do X, then 3 other iterations apart from this, Y is going to occur. And I think that comes from experience, obviously. So you've got to have some leadership experience, and that's important to get. But it also comes from having a pretty good sense of yourself, because if you don't know yourself pretty well, then you're going to get yourself into a lot of trouble from time to time. And so I think the experiences of working with people, nothing trains you like that. And I tell students all the time that if they're president of no matter what, and they're basically in charge of motivating individuals and then seeing to it that the plans are implemented, that's incredible experience for them going out, because it's all the same. It's just a matter of what the topic is and what the goal is. Leadership basically plays out in the same way. And so I urge them to get experience. I urge them to learn to talk, to communicate, to take those speech classes, to always be willing to volunteer to do things that are leadership oriented. And then I tell them to get to know themselves, that they cannot be impulsive, they cannot be short-tempered, and they've got to have a pretty good sense of themselves before they can hope to try to provide some leadership for others.
What's the secret to generating money for the university?
I think it's mainly having a vision that other people will share with you, and that then you provide ways that empower them to implement that vision. Ours is to be among the top 50 institutions in the United States. The U.S. News and World Report, we were 56. 50 is a nebulous number, but to be among those when people are talking about the top private schools in the United States, we won't be at Harvard, Yale, but we want to be in that next group because we're only 100 years old this year of the founding, 96 years old of the opening. So we're still in many ways getting started from that aspect. But they have to have a sense that what the institution does is important, and that they can have an important role in it. And once they see what they can do at whatever level fits in with that vision, well, then they'll help you. If it's just a matter of giving money, they're not going to do it. And if it's not moving forward and improving, they're not going to want to be a part of it. And so it requires a vision that they can buy into and that they can support and that they can see how they can do it. And then knowing that there'll be follow-up, that this will occur and that it's going forward. It's not just based upon this particular year, this particular project, that the image and the commitment to it is bigger. And that's where your board comes in to ratify and affirm that.
What percentage of college presidents and university presidents are PhDs?
You know, by far and away the majority, it's over 90%, I believe the last figure, but that's going down. More JDs now are presidents than used to be.
Lawyers.
Yes, there are not as many, there's still not many just master's level people, but there are few. But mainly it's PhDs, there's some EDDs, and there's some variations on different doctoral degrees, but you're seeing more lawyers become university presidents than you used to.
What's an EDD?
Educational doctorate. It basically doesn't have the independent research level that a PhD does.
Now, if you had to start over again, knowing and you're not going to become an academic and you had to choose another profession, what would it be?
I don't have any idea. I mean, I wanted to be an academic. It was just a matter of what. My dad was a junior high principal, and my mother taught 4th to 8th grade. And so in a very real way, as I said at the beginning, I'm in the family business. And so I've always wanted to be a part of working with young people. And I've always, even when I was one. And so I really have never considered the company boards I've been on. I've never been on a company board that I thought I'd really rather be president of that company than what I'm doing. I just never found anything that I'd rather do than what I'm doing.
What are those 3 boards you're on?
J.C. Penney, Kronos, and American Beacon Funds.
Dr. Gerald Turner, president of SMU. We're out of time, and I thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
For a DVD copy of this program, call 1-877-662-7726. For free transcripts or to give us your comments about this program, visit us at qna.org. Q&A programs are also available as C-SPAN podcasts.